she was sent instead of her sister as a mail-order bride, and what the ruthless mountain man did next will leave you speechless. The stagecoach door slams shut. A plain, trembling young woman is pushed into the snow, while a scarred giant waits with cold eyes and a rifle in hand. He growls, "You're not the one I paid for." But when she lights a fire, kneels in prayer, and dares to stay, everything begins to change. In town, whispers spread like wildfire. A preacher warns the man to honor her, or face God's judgment. Then comes the knock on the door, a U.S. Marshal with papers that could strip the mountain from under his boots. Only her testimony can save him, but the past rides in fast. The beautiful sister returns, holding a secret that could destroy them all. Now the cabin is torn between loyalty, betrayal, and a fight against the railroad's greed. Will the mountain man cast her aside as a mistake, or claim her as the greatest gift God ever sent? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The thin light of dawn crept through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the wooden floorboards of the Kansas farmhouse. Anna Mae Whitcomb stood motionless, her hands clasped tightly around the worn leather handle of her small satchel. The familiar scents of morning coffee and wood smoke did little to calm her racing heart. "Father, please!" Eliza's voice broke through the stillness. "You can't send Anna in my place. It isn't right." Anna watched as her beautiful sister, dressed in her finest blue dress, grabbed their father's sleeve. Tears streaked down Eliza's perfect face, but Anna knew they wouldn't sway him. Father's jaw was set in that familiar, unmovable way. "Enough, Eliza." His voice was gruff, tired from the endless arguing. "You're promised to Mr. Richardson now. He's offering security, a fine house in town. This mountain man, this Luca Kane, he's just a trapper with a patch of land. Anna will do well enough for him." The words stung, even though Anna had expected them. She clutched her mother's Bible closer to her chest, its leather binding smooth and familiar against her calloused fingers. She hadn't packed much, just some plain dresses, a few precious photographs, and the quilting squares she'd been working on. What else would a replacement bride need? "The stage will be here soon," Father said, not meeting Anna's eyes. "Best get your goodbyes said." Eliza threw her arms around Anna, her expensive perfume overwhelming. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I never meant for this to happen. But Mr. Richardson, he's offering so much." "I understand," Anna whispered, though she didn't, not really. But she'd learned long ago that understanding wasn't required for acceptance. The Lord had his reasons, even if they weren't clear to her now. The rumble of wagon wheels outside drew them all to attention. The stagecoach had arrived, right on schedule, its red paint dusty from the Kansas roads. The driver, a weather-beaten man with kind eyes, helped load Anna's single trunk while she said her final goodbyes. Father's hug was brief, awkward. "You'll do your duty," he said. "Make us proud." Anna nodded, not trusting her voice. The step up into the coach seemed impossibly high, but she managed it with as much grace as she could muster. As she settled onto the hard leather seat, she caught one last glimpse of Eliza, radiant even in her distress, standing in the doorway of the only home Anna had ever known. The journey west was a blur of endless motion and changing landscapes. Days melted together as the stage rolled through Nebraska territory and into Colorado. Other passengers came and went, a missionary couple, a traveling salesman, a widow returning to her son's ranch. Anna spoke little, spending her time watching the prairie grass give way to rolling hills, and finally to the looming shadows of mountains. The air grew thinner, colder. Anna pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders as they climbed higher into the Colorado territory. Her prayer book lay open in her lap, though the bouncing of the coach made reading nearly impossible. Instead, she whispered her prayers silently, asking for strength, for guidance, for the courage to face whatever waited at the end of this journey. "Last stop before Miller's Creek," the driver called out one afternoon. "Anyone needing to stretch their legs best do it now." Anna stayed in her seat, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her skirts. Miller's Creek. That was where she'd meet her future husband. Luca Kane. The name felt foreign on her tongue when she whispered it to herself. All she knew of him came from the letters he'd exchanged with Eliza, a rancher and trapper, 32 years old, looking for a capable wife to help work his land. The sun was setting when the stage began its final descent into a narrow valley. Snow lay in patches beneath the pine trees, and the wind carried a bite that made Anna's eyes water. The coach swayed as it turned onto a narrow track, the wheels crunching through frozen mud and old snow. "Kane Place!" the driver called out, pulling the team to a stop before a lonely cabin tucked against the foothills. The structure looked solid enough, with a stone chimney sending up wisps of smoke into the darkening sky. A crude barn stood off to one side, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Anna gathered her satchel and Bible with trembling fingers. The driver helped her down, then quickly unloaded her trunk. He seemed eager to be on his way before full dark settled in. "God be with you, miss," he said, touching the brim of his hat. Then he was back up on his seat, clucking to his team. The stage pulled away, leaving Anna standing alone in the gathering dusk. Movement on the cabin's porch drew her attention. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, and Anna's breath caught in her throat. Luca Kane stepped into view, his rifle slung across his broad chest. Even in the failing light, she could see the scar that ran down the left side of his face, pulling at the corner of his mouth. His dark hair was longer than most men wore it, and his beard was untrimmed. But it was his eyes that held her. Hard, suspicious eyes that seemed to cut right through her. He looked her over slowly, taking in her plain brown traveling dress, her simple hat, the Bible clutched in her hands. His expression darkened. "You're not the sister I paid for." His voice was low and rough, like he didn't use it often. The words carried clearly in the cold air between them. Anna lowered her gaze, fighting to keep her voice steady. "No, sir. I'm Anna Mae Whitcomb. Eliza couldn't come." The wind whipped around them, catching at Anna's skirts and sending a shower of pine needles skittering across the frozen ground. She could feel Luca Kane's stare, heavy as a physical weight. "Couldn't come?" The words were practically a growl. Or wouldn't? "She's promised to another." Anna forced herself to look up, to meet those hard eyes. "Father sent me in her place. I know I'm not what you expected, Mr. Kane, but I'm a hard worker. I can cook and sew and tend to a house proper." Luca Kane's hand tightened on his rifle strap. "I paid good money for a bride, sent letters, made arrangements." His voice grew harder with each word. "And they send me the plain sister instead?" The words stung, but Anna held her ground. She'd heard worse, survived worse. "Yes, sir. The plain sister. The one who knows how to birth lambs and mend fences. The one who can stretch a meal when stores run low and who won't complain about the work." She took a deep breath. "The one standing right here in front of you, while my sister sits in Kansas dreaming of her fine house in town." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the mournful call of a distant coyote. The last light was fading from the sky, and the wind had a razor's edge to it now. Anna's fingers were growing numb around the handle of her satchel, but she didn't move. This moment, she knew, would determine everything. Finally, Luca Kane stepped down from the porch. His boots crunched in the snow as he approached her trunk. "There's a spare room off the kitchen," he said, his voice still cold. "You can sleep there tonight. We'll figure out what to do with you in the morning." It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was shelter for the night, and that was enough for now. Anna watched as he lifted her trunk with ease, carrying it towards the cabin. She followed, her legs stiff from days of travel, her heart heavy with uncertainty. The wind cut sharp between them as she climbed the porch steps, the wooden boards creaking beneath her feet. Just before she crossed the threshold into what was supposed to be her new home, Anna paused for a moment of silent prayer. Not for herself. She'd learned long ago that comfort wasn't guaranteed in this life. No, she prayed for the bitter man ahead of her, for the pain she'd glimpsed behind his hard eyes, for whatever had put that scar on his face and that ice in his heart. "Coming in?" Luca Kane's voice carried from the darkness of the cabin. "Or are you planning to let all the heat out?" "Yes, sir," Anna replied softly, stepping inside. "I'm coming in." The cabin door creaked shut behind them, sealing out the bitter mountain wind. Anna blinked, letting her eyes adjust to the dim interior. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across rough-hewn log walls. The main room was spare but tidy, a table with 2 chairs, a few hooks for coats, shelves lined with provisions. The air carried the musty scent of dried herbs and wood smoke. Luca Kane dropped her trunk near a narrow doorway. "Spare rooms through there," he said curtly, "such as it is." Anna nodded, still clutching her Bible and satchel. She took a tentative step toward the hearth, drawn by its warmth after the long, cold journey. The floorboards squeaked beneath her feet. "Sit if you want," Luca growled, stalking towards the iron cook stove. "Though you won't be staying long. First stage heading east, that's where you'll be." He yanked open a cupboard, muttering under his breath. "Paid good money. Promised a proper bride. Cheated by some farmer who can't keep his word." The words stung, but Anna kept her silence. She perched on the edge of a straight-backed chair near the fire, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The warmth slowly seeped into her bones as she watched Luca slam pots and pans around the stove. "Sir?" she ventured quietly. "Would you like me to prepare supper?" Luca turned, his scarred face harsh in the firelight. "What?" "I could cook," Anna said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "If you'd show me what provisions you have." He studied her for a long moment, suspicion clear in his dark eyes. Finally, he jerked his chin towards the pantry. "Suit yourself. Got cornmeal, beans, some salt pork. Coffee's running low." Anna rose, setting her Bible carefully on the chair. In the pantry, she found the ingredients arranged with surprising neatness. She gathered what she needed, moving deliberately, aware of Luca's gaze following her every motion. The familiar routine of cooking helped calm her nerves. She stirred cornmeal into boiling water, adding a pinch of salt. The beans were already cooked. She found them in a covered pot near the back of the stove. A bit of salt pork would add flavor. She worked in silence, the only sounds the crack of the fire and the soft bubbling of the cornmeal mush. "Should have known something was wrong," Luca muttered, pacing near the door. "Letters were too fine, too educated. Bet you can't even write like that, can you?" "No, sir," Anna admitted, turning the salt pork in its pan. "But I can write plain enough to keep accounts and make lists, and I can read my Bible." He snorted. "Bible won't help much up here in winter." "I respectfully disagree, Mr. Kane." She kept her voice mild as she spooned the cornmeal into bowls. "Faith has seen me through many winters." The look he gave her was dark with something beyond anger, something that spoke of old hurts and buried grief. Without another word, he yanked open the cabin door, and strode out into the gathering night, letting in a blast of cold air. Anna's hands trembled as she finished setting out the simple meal. When the door didn't open again, she sank to her knees beside the hearth. The firelight played across her clasped hands as she bowed her head. "Lord," she whispered, "grant me strength to face whatever comes. Help me to show kindness even when it's not returned. And please—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "Please help heal whatever has hardened Mr. Kane's heart so." She didn't hear the door open, didn't notice Luca's tall form in the shadows, watching her lips move in prayer. She remained kneeling until the final "Amen," then rose to check on the cooling bowls of food. The door creaked, and Luca stepped inside. Snow dusted his shoulders, and his breath came out in visible puffs of steam. He stood for a moment, looking at the simple meal laid out on the table. "It'll get cold if you don't eat," Anna said quietly. He grunted but moved to the table, dropping heavily into one of the chairs. Anna took the other seat, folding her hands in her lap until he took the first bite. The silence stretched as they ate. Anna kept her eyes on her bowl, though she could feel Luca's gaze on her from time to time. When he finished, he pushed his empty bowl away. "Decent enough," he muttered. "Better than my cooking anyway." Anna looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time since supper began. "Thank you, sir." He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Still ain't keeping you permanent, but—" He scowled at the fire. "Winter's coming on hard. Stage won't run regular once the snow sets in proper." His jaw worked as if the words pained him. "You can stay till spring. Not as a wife, mind you. Just till the pass is clear." Relief and hurt mingled in Anna's chest. "I understand, Mr. Kane. Thank you." "Don't thank me," he growled, rising abruptly. "Just doing what's Christian, letting you winter here. Come spring, you're gone." He stalked to his own cot in the corner of the main room, turning his back to her. Anna gathered the dishes quietly, washing them in the basin by the stove. When everything was clean and put away, she took her Bible and made her way to the spare room. It was little more than a closet, really, with a narrow cot and a small window. But it was clean, and the quilt folded on the bed looked warm. Anna changed quickly in the dark, shivering in her thin nightgown. The cot creaked as she slipped beneath the quilt. Rejection sat heavy in her chest, but she refused to let it crush her spirit. Instead, she held her Bible close and whispered one final prayer into the darkness. "Lord, thank you for shelter from the storm. Please help me prove my worth, not just to Mr. Kane, but to myself. And if it be your will—" She paused, her voice dropping even softer. "Help me find a true home here, in your time and your way. Amen." From the main room came the sound of Luca shifting on his cot. Anna closed her eyes, pulling the quilt tighter around her shoulders. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. But inside the cabin, despite everything, Anna found enough peace to drift into an exhausted sleep. Dawn crept over the mountains, painting the frost-covered windows in shades of gray. Anna woke to the bitter cold, her breath visible in the dim light of her tiny room. She pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders and slipped quietly from beneath the heavy quilt. The main room was dark and silent, except for Luca's steady breathing from his corner. Anna moved carefully to the stove, adding kindling and small logs from the box beside it. Her fingers, stiff with cold, struck a match, and soon a small flame flickered to life. As the fire grew, she glanced at Luca's sleeping form. In repose, his face seemed younger, the hard lines softened. The scar that ran from his temple to jaw stood out starkly against his skin, and Anna wondered what story lay behind it. He stirred, and she quickly turned away, not wanting to be caught staring. The cabin needed attention. While the coffee began to percolate, Anna swept the floor and straightened the few pieces of furniture. A hunting coat hung by the door, and as she reached to brush off some dried mud, she noticed a long tear in the sleeve. The light was better now, streaming through the windows in pale shafts. Anna retrieved her sewing basket from her room and settled near the stove with the coat. The tear was ragged but clean enough to mend properly. Luca woke to the smell of coffee and cornmeal mush. He sat up, running a hand through his dark hair, and saw Anna by the fire, working on his coat. "Didn't ask you to do that," he said gruffly. "No, sir," Anna replied, keeping her eyes on her neat stitches. But it needed doing. He grunted and rose, pulling on his boots. After a quick breakfast eaten in silence, he strapped on his snowshoes and grabbed his rifle. "Checking the trap line," he said shortly. "Back by midday." Anna nodded, already clearing away the breakfast dishes. The door opened and closed, letting in a blast of cold air, and then she was alone. The morning passed quietly as Anna continued putting the cabin to rights. She found satisfaction in small victories: shelves reorganized, floors scrubbed, windows wiped clean. When she discovered a pile of socks with holes, she added them to her mending basket. True to his word, Luca returned as the sun peaked. Snow dusted his shoulders and hat, and his cheeks were red with cold. He carried 2 rabbits and what looked like a fox pelt. "Your coat's mended," Anna said, gesturing to where it hung by the door. "I found some socks that need darning too, if you don't mind." Luca checked the sleeve of his coat, running his thumb over the careful stitches. His expression flickered with something Anna couldn't quite read. "Got some venison," he said finally, reaching into his pack. "From last week's hunt. Could make a stew if you've a mind to." "Yes, sir, thank you." That evening, as the stew simmered on the stove, Anna sat in the firelight with the pile of socks. Without really meaning to, she began to hum, then sing softly, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." Her voice wavered at first but grew stronger as she continued. Across the room, Luca sat in his chair, running a whetstone along his hunting knife. He didn't look up, but his rhythmic sharpening slowed. "I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." The hymn faded into silence, broken only by the crack of the fire and the soft scrape of the whetstone. Anna thought she saw Luca's hands trembling slightly, but when she glanced his way again, they were steady as ever. Days fell into a pattern. Anna rose early to tend the fire and prepare breakfast. Luca would leave to hunt or check his traps, returning with game or pelts. She kept the cabin, cooked their meals, and slowly worked her way through the mending. Though they rarely spoke beyond what was necessary, the silence grew less heavy. Sunday dawned clear and cold. As Anna set out their breakfast, she gathered her courage. "Mr. Kane," she said softly, Is there a church nearby?" Luca looked up sharply from his coffee. "What of it?" "I'd like to attend services, if possible." She smoothed her skirt nervously. "If you don't mind telling me how to get there." He scowled into his cup. "There's one in town, 10 miles west. Can't have you walking it alone." "Oh." Anna's shoulders slumped slightly. "Of course not, I understand." Luca muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse. "Got to go to town anyway," he said finally. "Need supplies. Could hitch up the wagon." Relief and gratitude washed over Anna's face. "Thank you, Mr. Kane. I won't be any trouble." The wagon ride was cold but beautiful. Fresh snow blanketed the pines, and the morning sun made everything sparkle. Anna sat straight and still beside Luca, her Bible clutched in gloved hands. She'd put on her best dress, a simple brown wool that had seen better days, and tried to smooth her hair beneath her bonnet. The town was smaller than she'd expected, a handful of buildings strung along a single street. The church stood at one end, a modest white clapboard structure with a small steeple. As Luca helped her down from the wagon, she could feel eyes on them from every direction. Inside, the church was warm and bright, with sunlight streaming through its windows. But as they made their way to a pew, whispers followed like shadows. "That's Kane's mail-order bride. Thought she was supposed to be a beauty. Heard tell it was the sister who was promised. Sent the plain one instead." Anna kept her eyes forward, her cheeks burning. Luca's jaw was clenched tight as he sat beside her, his body rigid with tension. The preacher, a kind-faced man with gray at his temples, approached them before the service began. "Welcome," he said warmly to Anna. "I'm Reverend Matthews. We're glad to have you join us." "Thank you, Reverend," Anna replied softly. "I'm Anna Mae Whitcomb." The preacher's eyes moved to Luca, and his expression grew stern. "Kane," he said, nodding slightly. "Been a while since we've seen you here." Luca said nothing, his face like stone. The service began, and Anna lost herself in the familiar rhythms of worship. She sang the hymns clear and true, though her voice shook at first. During prayer, she felt Luca shift beside her and opened her eyes to see him staring straight ahead, his hands clenched in his lap. After the final hymn, as people began to file out, the whispers started again. Anna caught fragments as she gathered her Bible. "Lesser sister. Poor Kane, being cheated so. Wonder what happened to the pretty one." A woman in a fine blue dress passed close by, her eyes raking over Anna's worn clothes. "Well," she said, loud enough to carry, "I suppose some men must settle for what they can get." Anna's hands tightened on her Bible, but before she could speak, Luca was on his feet. His face was dark with anger as he glared at the woman, who took a step back. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Reckon you've forgotten what the good book says about bearing false witness and idle gossip?" The woman flushed and hurried away. Luca turned to Anna, his expression still thunderous. "Come on," he said roughly. "Got supplies to get before we head back." As they walked to the wagon, Anna felt the weight of stares and whispers pressing in from all sides. But she held her head high, drawing strength from the morning's prayers and, unexpectedly, from Luca's defense of her. The Reverend watched them go, his eyes troubled as he observed the townspeople's reactions. He had seen the quiet dignity in Anna's bearing, the way she lifted her voice in praise despite the cruel whispers, and he had not missed the protective way Luca had positioned himself between her and the worst of the gossips. The sun was high when they loaded the last of the supplies into the wagon. As they started the long ride home, Anna sat straight and tall beside Luca, her Bible still clutched close. The whispers of the town faded behind them, but their echo lingered in the silence between them. The church doors swung open, letting in a blast of cold air as the congregation filed out into the snowy afternoon. Anna pulled her shawl tighter, keeping close to Luca as they made their way down the wooden steps. Her cheeks still burned from the whispers inside, but she held her head, steady, clutching her Bible like a shield. "Well, if it ain't Luca Kane," came a drawling voice. "Finally showed your face in church again." 3 men had gathered near the hitching post where their wagon waited. The speaker, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, stepped forward with a smirk. His companions spread out, effectively boxing them in against the church wall. "Heard tell you ordered yourself a mail-order bride," the man continued, his eyes sliding dismissively over Anna. "Though seems you got sent damaged goods instead." Anna's eyes dropped to the snow-covered ground, her fingers white-knuckled around her Bible. Beside her, she felt Luca go rigid with tension. "Step aside, Morrison," Luca growled. "We've got a long ride home." "Now don't be unfriendly," Morrison pressed, his smile turning cruel. "Just wondering how it feels to pay good money for a prize filly and end up with a workhorse instead." One of his companions chuckled. "Reckon that's what happens when you try buying a wife through the post." Luca's hand twitched toward his belt, where Anna knew he kept a knife. Her heart hammered in her chest as she touched his arm lightly, a silent plea for peace. "Gentlemen." The Reverend Matthews's stern voice cut through the tension. He emerged from the church, his gray eyes taking in the scene with quiet authority. "I believe you're blocking the path to Mr. Kane's wagon." The men shuffled aside, though Morrison couldn't resist one final jab. "Just having a friendly chat with the newlyweds, Reverend." "Indeed." The preacher's tone made it clear he wasn't fooled. He turned to Luca and Anna, his expression softening slightly. "Mr. Kane, might I have a word before you head home?" Luca hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Wait in the wagon," he told Anna, his voice rough. She climbed carefully onto the wagon seat, tucking her skirts around her legs against the cold. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, she could see Luca and the Reverend standing in the shadow of the church. The preacher spoke earnestly, his hand occasionally gesturing as if making a point. Luca stood like stone, his shoulders rigid beneath his heavy coat. As she waited, fat snowflakes began drifting down from the pewter sky. Around her, other churchgoers hurried to their own wagons and carriages, some casting curious glances her way. A group of women huddled nearby, their whispers carrying on the wind. Trading on her sister's promise. Deceiving a man like that. Ought to be ashamed. Anna bowed her head, letting her bonnet hide her face as tears pricked at her eyes. She focused on her breathing, the way her mother had taught her when things got hard. In, out, in, out. The snow fell harder. Finally, Luca strode back to the wagon, his face dark with some emotion she couldn't read. He swung up beside her and snapped the reins, turning the team toward home without a word. As they passed the church, Anna glimpsed Reverend Matthews watching them go, his expression troubled. The snow thickened as they drove, the flakes swirling in the gathering dusk. Their progress slowed as the horses picked their way carefully along the rutted road. In town, lights began appearing in windows, golden squares glowing through the white veil of snow. "Look how pretty the lamplight looks," Anna said softly, breaking the heavy silence. "Like stars caught in the storm." Luca didn't respond, but his jaw clenched tighter. The wagon creaked on through deepening snow, the town gradually falling away behind them. Wind moaned through the pines, driving the flakes sideways now. Anna huddled deeper into her shawl, trying not to shiver. It was full dark by the time they reached the cabin. Luca jumped down without a word and led the horses toward the barn, his movements sharp with suppressed anger. The barn door slammed with enough force to shake snow from the roof. Anna made her way carefully to the cabin, her skirts already wet from the snow. Inside, she moved quickly to light the lamp and stoke the banked fire back to life. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set out bread and cheese for their supper, along with the last of yesterday's stew. When Luca finally came in, bringing a blast of cold air with him, she had managed to warm the cabin somewhat. He shed his snow-covered coat and boots, then dropped heavily into his chair at the table. The lamplight threw harsh shadows across his face as he stared into nothing, lost in dark thoughts. Anna ladled stew into a bowl and set it before him, then poured him a cup of coffee. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for taking me to church today. no matter what others might have said. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing as if searching for mockery in her words. Finding only sincerity, he looked away again, but something in his rigid posture seemed to soften slightly. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. Anna sat down with her own small portion of stew, saying grace silently before eating. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the scrape of spoons and the storm's fury. Luca brooded over his coffee, remembering the Reverend's words. "That girl is under your protection now, Cain. The whole town will be watching to see how you treat her. If you abuse this trust, if you fail to show her the dignity she deserves as your wife in the eyes of God, you'll find yourself cut off from more than just the congregation." The threat wasn't idle. In these mountains, a man needed community to survive, needed neighbors to help with harvest, to raise barns, to sit with the sick and bury the dead. Even a loner like him couldn't afford to be truly cast out. He glanced at Anna, taking in her bowed head, the careful way she ate her meager portion. The townsfolk's cruel words echoed in his mind, along with his own first harsh greeting when she'd arrived. Something uncomfortably like shame stirred in his chest. The storm raged on outside, but in the cabin's lamplight, Anna continued, her quiet routine. She cleared the dishes, wiped down the table, and took up her mending basket. Soon the soft click of her needle joined the crackle of the fire, steady and peaceful despite everything that had happened that day. Luca sat in his chair, turning the Reverend's warning over and over in his mind. The social pressure of the town's expectations weighed heavy on his shoulders, yet it was Anna's simple thanks, her gentle acceptance, that truly unsettled him. He demanded Eliza, the beautiful sister, and instead received this plain, steady woman who met cruelty with grace. The wind screamed across the roof, and somewhere in the dark, a coyote answered with its lonely cry. A week had passed since the church incident, and the late winter morning dawned clear and cold. Anna stood at the cabin's small window, watching Luca load his wagon with pelts. He'd been quieter than usual these past days, if such a thing were possible. Not angry exactly, just thoughtful. "Should be back by sundown," he said gruffly, adjusting his coat against the chill. "Got enough firewood split to last?" Anna nodded. "Yes, thank you." She'd noticed these small considerations lately, making sure she had wood, leaving water drawn before he went out trapping. Tiny things, but they felt like the first drops of spring thaw. The wagon creaked away down the snowy track, leaving Anna to her usual routine. She hummed softly while sweeping the rough plank floor, then set bread to rise near the hearth. The cabin felt different when she was alone. Not exactly peaceful, but quieter. She could breathe a little easier without Luca's brooding presence filling every corner. Around midday, as she was stirring a pot of soup, a weak knock sounded at the door. Anna frowned, setting down her spoon. They rarely had visitors, especially with Luca gone. The knock came again, fainter this time. Anna opened the door to find a small girl swaying on the step, her face flushed with fever. "Please," the child whispered, then doubled over coughing. "Papa said to find the nearest house." "Oh, you poor thing." Anna caught the girl as she stumbled. "Come inside right away." The child was light in her arms, burning with fever through her thin coat. Anna settled her close to the fire, wrapping her in a quilt. "I'm Anna. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Clara Johnson." Another bout of coughing shook her small frame. "Papa's working. Clearing trees. Didn't know I followed him." "Hush now." Anna felt Clara's forehead, alarmed at the heat. "Let's get some warm broth in you. Then we'll send word to your father." She heated chicken broth, adding herbs she'd dried last fall. While it warmed, she dampened a cloth with cool water and laid it across Clara's brow. The girl's breathing was rough, rattling in her chest. "My mama used to sing when I was sick," Anna said softly, trying to distract Clara from her discomfort. "Would you like to hear a hymn?" Clara nodded weakly. Anna began to sing Amazing Grace, her voice clear and gentle in the quiet cabin. The familiar melody seemed to soothe the child, whose breathing gradually eased. Between sips of broth and cool cloths, Anna sang every hymn she knew. Clara drifted in and out of sleep, her small hand clutching Anna's skirts. The afternoon light shifted golden across the cabin floor. "My sister loved this one," Anna said softly, starting, "What a friend we have in Jesus." She thought of Eliza, wondering if her sister ever sang these old songs anymore, there in her fine house with her wealthy suitor. As the sun began to set, heavy boots thumped on the porch. A big man burst through the door, his face creased with worry. "Clara!" "Papa!" The girl tried to sit up, but started coughing again. "Mr. Johnson, I presume?" Anna rose smoothly. "Clara's fever has come down some, but she needs rest. I've been giving her broth and keeping her warm." The man's shoulders sagged with relief. "Been searching everywhere since I noticed her gone. Should have known she'd try following me to work." He gathered Clara carefully in his arms, quilt and all. "Don't know how to thank you, Mrs. Kane." "Anna, please, and no thanks needed. Any neighbor would do the same." Johnson's expression turned awkward. "Some might not. Town talks, you know, but my Clara's a good judge of character." He shifted the sleeping child higher. "We'd be honored if you'd visit sometime. Clara could use a friend with a voice like yours." After they left, Anna washed the extra dishes and hung the quilt by the fire to air. The cabin felt emptier somehow, though the lingering notes of hymns seemed to soften the silence. Near full dark, the wagon's familiar creak announced Luca's return. He stamped snow from his boots, then paused, noticing the extra bowl and cup drying by the sink. "Had company?" His tone was careful, neutral. Anna told him about Clara as she served their supper. "Poor thing, walking so far in this cold. I couldn't turn her away." Luca pushed his beans around his plate. "Johnson's girl? Heard she was sickly?" He fell quiet, his face distant with memory. "Had a sister once. Fever took her during the war while I was away fighting. By the time I got word..." He trailed off, but Anna heard all he didn't say in the silence. Gently, she offered, "What was her name?" "Mary." His voice was rough. "She was just 14. Used to sing too, like you were doing today." Anna's hands stilled on her cup. "You heard?" "Coming up the path. Reminded me." He cleared his throat. "Well, past is past." But something had shifted, like ice breaking up on a spring river. Anna saw it in the way his shoulders curved inward, protective of old grief finally allowed to surface. The next morning dawned bright and cold. Anna gathered the washing in her basket, ready to take advantage of the clear weather. These days were rare in late winter, cold enough to freeze the wet clothes stiff, but sunny enough to dry them eventually. She struggled with the heavy line, which had come loose in recent winds. Suddenly, Luca was there, taking the rope from her hands. He secured it between two posts while she began hanging sheets. They worked in companionable silence, their breath frosting in the morning air. When Anna reached for a high part of the line, her fingers brushed Luca's as he steadied it. For the first time, he didn't jerk away from the contact. The sun climbed higher, making the snow brilliant around them. Anna's hands grew red with cold as she pinned up the last pieces. The familiar work felt different somehow, shared. That evening, they sat at their usual places, Anna mending by lamplight, Luca cleaning his rifle. But the silence between them had changed, grown softer. Less like a wall and more like a warm blanket, wrapped around them both. Anna's needle flashed in the light as she darned a sock. Luca's hands moved steadily over the gun barrel. Outside, wind sighed through pine boughs and snow creaked in the cold. Inside, peace settled over the cabin like gently falling snow, covering old wounds with new possibilities. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the cabin windows, casting long shadows across the plank floor. Anna stirred the soup simmering on the cook stove, adding a pinch of dried herbs. The familiar routine brought comfort after another Sunday of sideways glances at church. Though fewer townsfolk whispered now, she still felt the weight of being the replacement sister. The sudden thunder of hoofbeats broke the quiet. Anna peered through the window, her heart quickening at the sight of an official-looking rider approaching. His badge caught the fading light. Luca burst through the door, rifle in hand. "Stay inside," he ordered, moving to the porch. The rider reined his horse to a stop, dust swirling around the animal's legs. "Luca Kane?" His voice carried authority. "Marshal Jedediah Carter, got business with you." Anna watched through the window as Luca lowered his rifle slightly but didn't set it down. "State your business, Marshal." The lawman dismounted, pulling papers from his saddlebag. His movements were deliberate, practiced. "Got a summons here. Your land claim's been challenged." Luca's shoulders tensed. "By who?" "Railroad survey team." Marshal Carter held out the documents. "They're claiming prior rights to timber and water on your mountain tract." Anna's fingers clutched her apron as Luca snatched the papers. His face darkened as he read. "This is my land," he growled. "Been working it 3 years now." The marshal nodded slowly. "Reckon so, but their lawyers are clever folk. Only way to secure your claim proper is through homestead laws." He paused, glancing toward the window where Anna stood. "Which requires sworn testimony from a legal wife." The words fell heavy in the evening air. Anna felt her chest tighten as Luca went very still. "How long?" Luca's voice was rough. "Got 30 days to appear before the land office with proper documentation." The marshal adjusted his hat. "Including marriage certificate and wife's sworn statement about working the land as family property." Luca's knuckles whitened on the papers. The temporary arrangement he'd agreed to suddenly carried far more weight. "Much obliged for the warning, Marshal." Luca's words were clipped. Marshal Carter swung back into his saddle. "No warning, Kane, just the law." He gathered his reins. "And Kane? Heard talk in town about your bride situation. Make sure everything's proper legal before you come in." With that, he wheeled his horse and rode away. Anna's hands trembled as she ladled soup into bowls. Luca hadn't spoken since coming inside, just sat at the table staring at the summons. The silence stretched tight as a fiddle string. "What does it mean?" she finally asked, setting his bowl before him. "About the land?" Luca pushed the papers aside roughly. "Means the railroad wants what's mine. Good timber up there, clean water from the spring, worth plenty to them." "And my testimony could help?" Anna sank into her chair, soup forgotten. "Legal wife's testimony." Luca's laugh was bitter. "Proving we're working it as family land, not just a single man's claim they can override." He looked at her directly for the first time. "You weren't supposed to matter this much." The words stung, though Anna knew he hadn't meant them cruelly. She was just a tool now, useful for saving his land, nothing more. The thought settled cold in her stomach. "I see." She picked up her spoon, needing something to do with her hands. "What will you do?" Luca pushed back from the table. "Got no choice, do I? Either prove up the claim proper or lose everything I've built here." He strode to the window, staring out at the darkening mountains. "Railroad's been grabbing land all through the territory. Shouldn't be surprised they came for mine." Anna watched his rigid back, seeing the years of work in every line of tension. The cabin he'd built log by log, the barn raised by his own hands, the carefully maintained trap lines that kept them fed through winter. All of it threatened now, and she held the power to save it, or doom it. "I'll need to think," she said quietly. "Pray on it." Luca turned, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Ain't asking you to lie, just tell what you've seen since coming here, how we work the land together." "But we don't, not truly." Anna's voice wavered. "I'm here on sufferance, remember? Just for the winter, you said." He flinched as his own words came back to him. "Things change." "Do they?" She stood, gathering their barely touched bowls. "Or am I just useful now?" Luca had no answer for that. He grabbed his coat and stalked out to check the stock, leaving Anna alone with her thoughts. Night settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. Wind moaned through the pine trees, rattling the windows in their frames. Anna lay in her narrow bed, Bible clutched to her chest, listening to the familiar creaks and groans of the house. Across the room, Luca sat in his chair by the dying fire. The flames painted his face in shifting shadows as he stared into their depths. Neither of them could find sleep. Anna's fingers traced the worn leather of her Bible cover. Inside were all the answers she needed, she knew. But which passage spoke to this situation? What was the righteous path when duty and heart pulled in different directions? She thought of her father's stern face as he'd sent her west in Eliza's place, of Luca's cold rejection when she'd arrived, of slow changes over weeks, small kindnesses, moments of almost peace. And now this. An unexpected pivot where she'd become essential to his future. The irony wasn't lost on her. The unwanted sister was now the key to everything. Luca shifted in his chair, throwing another log on the fire. Sparks swirled up the chimney like bright prayers. He hadn't asked anything of her yet, hadn't pressed for an answer. But time stretched ahead like a shadow. 30 days to decide. The wind gusted harder, making the cabin shudder. Anna pulled her quilt tighter, seeking comfort in its familiar weight. In the firelight, she saw Luca's hands clench on the arms of his chair. He was a proud man, she knew. Asking for help, especially from her, would cost him dearly. But pride wouldn't save his land. Only she could do that now. Anna closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer for guidance. The path ahead was unclear, but she felt the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders. Whatever she decided would shape both their futures. The fire crackled softly. Outside, an owl called into the darkness. Inside, 2 people lay awake, each wrestling with a future neither had imagined, bound together by necessity and law, separated by walls built of hurt and hesitation. Dawn was still hours away. Snow fell in thick, silent curtains outside the cabin window. Anna stoked the fire, adding another log as morning light filtered through the gray dawn. December had settled over the mountains like a heavy wool blanket, bringing shorter days and longer nights filled with frost-edged silence. She moved through her morning routine with practiced grace now, stoking the fire, mixing biscuit dough, setting water to boil. These simple tasks had become anchors in her new life, giving structure to days that might otherwise drift like the endless snow. Luca sat at the table, watching her work. He'd been doing that more lately, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The land office summons lay between them, unspoken but ever present. "Smells good," he said gruffly as she slid biscuits into the oven. "Thank you." Anna wiped flour from her hands. "Should be ready soon." The silence stretched between them, comfortable in a way it hadn't been before. Outside, wind rattled the window panes, making the candle flame dance. "Lost my wife in '63, Luca said suddenly, his voice rough. "During the war." Anna's hands stilled on her. Apron. She turned slowly, seeing how his shoulders had hunched, as if bearing a great weight. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Fever took her, and our daughter." His fingers traced patterns on the wooden table. "I was serving with the Union Army in Virginia when word came. Couldn't even make it home in time to—" He trailed off, swallowing hard. Anna moved quietly to the stove, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. She set one before him, not speaking, just listening. "After that, nothing much mattered," he continued. "Fought like a demon through the rest of the war. Didn't care if I lived or died." His laugh was bitter. "Probably why I survived when better men didn't." Steam rose from the coffee cups, curling in the morning light. Anna sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her cup's warmth. "When it was over, couldn't stand being around people anymore. Their pity, their talk of moving forward." Luca's voice grew distant. "So I came west, far as I could get. These mountains," he gestured toward the window. "They don't pity. They don't care about your past. They just are. But they're also very lonely," Anna said gently. Luca's eyes met hers, something vulnerable flickering in their depths. "Reckon so. Though lately—" He stopped, looking away. Anna rose to check the biscuits, her heart beating faster. She understood what he couldn't say, that somehow, despite everything, the loneliness had begun to ease. Later that morning, while Luca chopped wood outside, Anna sat at the table with paper and pencil. The letter to Eliza had been forming in her mind for days, but only now did the words come. "Dearest sister, I pray this finds you well. Winter has settled deep in the mountains here, beautiful and fierce as God's own breath. The cabin grows warmer each day, not just from the hearth fire, but from something else I hardly dare name. You know I came here in your stead, expecting nothing but duty and hardship. And there has been hardship, yes. But Eliza, there has also been—" Her pencil hesitated, then continued, "Something unexpected growing in my heart. Luca is not the cruel man we feared. He carries deep wounds, yes, but beneath them lies a soul of surprising gentleness. I find myself watching him when he isn't looking, seeing the way he handles injured animals with tender hands, or how he always ensures I have enough firewood before seeing to his own comfort. But I fear I am only a substitute, the lesser sister sent in your place. How can I trust these feelings when they may not be meant for me at all?" Anna paused, blinking back tears before continuing. "I know it's foolish to love someone who may never return that love, yet here I am, my heart opening like a winter flower, reaching toward what little warmth it finds. Please pray for me, sister. Pray that I find the strength to be content with whatever God's will may be. Your loving sister, Anna May." She folded the letter carefully, sealing it with a drop of candle wax. The stage would pass tomorrow. She could give it to the driver then. The day passed in quiet industry. Anna swept floors, mended shirts, prepared meals. Simple tasks, yet each one felt like weaving another thread into the fabric of their shared life. She caught herself humming hymns as she worked. "Amazing Grace, be thou my vision," the melodies rising unbidden from her heart. During supper, she noticed Luca watching her again, his expression softer than usual. When she began humming while washing dishes, his eyes followed her movements across the cabin. Something had shifted between them, like ice beginning to thaw. After the dishes were done, Anna took a candle to the window. The snow had stopped, leaving the world hushed and white under a rising moon. She set the light carefully on the sill. "What's that for?" Luca asked from his chair by the fire. "When I was small," Anna said softly, "my mother taught us to put a light in the window on dark nights. She said even in wilderness, God's light still shines." She touched the glass gently. "Sometimes a single candle can guide someone home." Luca rose slowly, coming to stand beside her. His presence was warm in the darkness, solid as the mountains outside. For a long moment they both watched the flame's reflection dance on the window pane, doubled against the night's blackness. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," he said finally. "She was?" Anna's voice was quiet. "She taught us that hope can survive anywhere if you tend it carefully enough." Luca's hand moved, almost touching her shoulder, then dropped away. But he remained beside her, their silence filled with unspoken words as the candle burned steadily against the dark. Outside, snow began falling again, soft and steady. Inside, two hearts beat in growing rhythm, while a single flame cast its light into the wilderness, marking home. The week before Christmas brought a gentle rhythm to the cabin. Each morning, Anna rose before dawn to stoke the fire and prepare breakfast while Luca tended to his trap lines. The routine had become as natural as breathing, his heavy boots crunching through snow, her quiet humming as she worked, their shared meals growing less silent with each passing day. One morning, Anna noticed Luca lingering in the barn longer than usual. Through the kitchen window, she could see him working with wood and tools, though he'd quickly close the door whenever she came near. Her curiosity grew, but she kept her questions to herself, respecting his privacy. The days shortened as Christmas approached, darkness falling early and stars emerging like diamonds scattered across the velvet sky. Anna missed her family's traditions, the gathering of cousins, her mother's special bread, Eliza's clear voice leading carols. Yet she found comfort in creating new rituals, hanging pine boughs over the doorway, setting her mother's silver cross on the mantel, keeping the window candle burning bright against the long nights. On Christmas Eve morning, Luca left before sunrise as usual. But this time he returned mid-morning, stomping snow from his boots with unusual energy. "Need the cabin for an hour," he said gruffly. "Would you mind checking the chickens?" Anna nodded, wrapping her shawl tight against the cold. She spent longer than necessary in the barn, giving the hens extra feed and gathering eggs with deliberate slowness. When Luca finally called her back, she stepped through the door and stopped short, her breath catching. There in front of the hearth stood a small table, crafted from pine and sanded smooth. The wood gleamed golden in the firelight, its surface polished to a soft sheen. 2 chairs had been pulled close, and atop the table sat something that made Anna's heart skip. A leather-bound Bible, its cover dusty but intact. "Luca," she whispered, touching the table's surface with trembling fingers. "Did you make this?" He shifted his weight, looking almost shy. "Needed a proper table for Christmas supper," he said. "Ain't much, but it's beautiful." Anna's voice was thick with emotion. She traced the careful joinery, the subtle decorative edge he'd carved along the sides. "Thank you," Luca cleared his throat. "Found this too." He gestured to the Bible. "Been packed away since, well, for a long while now." Anna opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed but whole, and inside the cover she saw flowing script. "To Lucas Kane and Sarah Matthews, on their wedding day 1860. "Your wedding Bible," she said softly. Luca nodded, his face shadowed. Figured maybe. Maybe it's time to dust it off. The afternoon passed in quiet preparation. Anna kneaded bread dough while Luca brought in more firewood, their movements falling into easy harmony. As evening approached, she set their simple feast on the new table. Fresh bread, venison stew, preserved apples from the root cellar. The cabin filled with warmth and savory aromas. After they'd eaten, Luca reached for the Bible with hesitant hands. Would you mind if I read?" he asked, his voice rough. Anna's heart swelled. "I'd like that very much." He opened to Luke's Gospel, the pages crackling softly. In the firelight, his face looked younger somehow, stripped of its usual hardness. His voice, though uncertain at first, grew stronger as he read. "And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed." Anna closed her eyes, letting the familiar words wash over her. How many Christmas Eves had she heard this story? Yet tonight it felt new, made fresh by Luca's deep voice and the quiet intensity with which he read. When he reached the part about the shepherds keeping watch by night, she opened her eyes to find him watching her, his expression soft with wonder. "And, lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them," he continued, "and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks, dancing upward. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving the world hushed and expectant. Anna felt tears prickling behind her eyes as Luca read on, his voice growing more confident with each verse. When he finished, silence fell between them, but it was a silence full of meaning. Anna found herself reaching across the table, touching his hand where it rested on the Bible's worn leather. "Thank you," she whispered. Luca turned his hand over, his rough palm meeting hers. Would you pray with me?" he asked, the words coming out barely above a whisper. Anna's tears spilled over then. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, I would." They bowed their heads together, their joined hands warm between them. Anna's voice trembled as she began. "Dear Lord, we thank you for this night, for the gift of your Son, for the light you bring into dark places." As she prayed, she felt Luca's hand tighten on hers. When she finished, he added his own quiet "Amen," the word carrying years of unused faith. When they raised their heads, the cabin seemed to glow with more than firelight. Luca stood slowly, drawing Anna up with him. They faced each other in the golden light, and Anna saw in his eyes something she'd never dared hope for: tenderness, wonder, and something deeper still. Luca lifted his free hand to her face, his touch feather-light against her cheek. "Anna," he said softly, her name a prayer on his lips. Then he leaned down, pressing his mouth to hers in a kiss as gentle as falling snow. Anna's heart soared as she returned the kiss, her hands finding his shoulders. This was no duty-bound embrace between a mail-order bride and her reluctant husband. This was something new and precious, born of shared days and quiet moments, of faith rekindled and hearts slowly opened. When they finally parted, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "I reckon," he said slowly, "I've been blessed with exactly the wife I needed, not the one I thought I wanted." Joy bubbled up in Anna's chest, spilling out as laughter. Luca joined in, the sound rusty but real, and soon they were both laughing beside the fire, the weight of months of uncertainty falling away like shed armor. They spent the rest of the evening sharing stories over fresh bread and coffee. Luca spoke of Christmases in his childhood home in Ohio, of his mother's plum pudding and his father's habit of singing carols off-key. Anna told him about the year she and Eliza had saved their egg money to buy their father a new hat, only to have it blown away in a Kansas windstorm. The fire burned low as they talked, casting warm shadows on the new table between them. Outside, stars pierced the clear night sky, and fresh snow glittered like scattered diamonds in their light. Inside, the cabin held them close, no longer a place of temporary shelter, but a true home, blessed by prayer and sealed with a kiss. For the first time since stepping off the stage into the Colorado winter, Anna felt fully, completely herself. Not a replacement, not a second choice, but a woman loved for exactly who she was. She watched Luca's face in the firelight, saw how the hard lines had softened, how his eyes held a peace she'd never seen before. Their hands found each other again across the table, and together they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance and listening to the quiet song of the winter night, their hearts beating in time with the rhythm of their shared life. Dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and rose. Inside the cabin, Anna stirred from sleep, her heart light despite the winter chill. The memory of last night's Christmas Eve kiss still warmed her through. She touched her lips, smiling at how everything had changed. Through the frosted window, she watched Luca trudging through the snow to feed the horses, his broad shoulders outlined against the brightening sky. The sight of him made her heart flutter. No longer the harsh stranger who'd first greeted her, but a man whose walls had finally begun to crumble. Anna hummed softly as she kindled the fire and mixed biscuit dough. The cabin felt different this morning, transformed by the previous night's tenderness. The new pine table gleamed in the early light, a symbol of their growing bond. The distant sound of wheels crunching through snow made her pause. Wiping flour from her hands, she peered out the window. Her heart stopped. A stagecoach was approaching, its team of horses leaving deep tracks in the pristine snow. As it drew closer, Anna gripped the windowsill, her knuckles white. She knew that elegant figure stepping down from the coach, knew the confident tilt of that head. "Eliza," she whispered. Her sister stood in the yard, resplendent in a fine blue traveling dress and fur-trimmed coat. The morning sun caught the golden highlights in her perfectly arranged hair. Even after the long journey, Eliza looked as fresh and lovely as a spring morning. Luca emerged from the barn, stopping short at the sight of the unexpected visitor. Anna watched his face, saw the flash of recognition followed by confusion. Her stomach twisted. "Mr. Kane," Eliza called out, her voice carrying clearly through the crisp air. "I've come to claim my rightful place." Anna's legs felt weak. She steadied herself against the table Luca had made for her, for them. The door opened, letting in a blast of cold air as Eliza swept inside. "Oh, Anna," Eliza said, looking around the cabin with barely concealed distaste. "How rustic. Though I suppose you've done what you could with it." Anna forced her voice to remain steady. "Welcome, Eliza. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be lovely, dear." Eliza removed her gloves with precise movements, though I'm sure it's not the quality I'm used to. Luca followed Eliza inside, his expression stormy. He stood near the door, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. The easy warmth of Christmas Eve had vanished, replaced by a terrible tension. "What brings you here?" he asked, his voice gruff. Eliza turned to him with a practiced smile. "Why, to set things right, of course. There seems to have been a misunderstanding about our arrangement." Anna's hands shook as she poured coffee into tin cups. Steam rose between them like a veil as she set them on the table. Eliza sat with perfect posture, somehow making the rough wooden chair look like a throne. "There's no misunderstanding," Luca said. "You chose not to honor our agreement." "A temporary lapse in judgment," Eliza replied smoothly. "One I'm here to rectify. Surely you'd prefer the bride you actually chose." Anna busied herself with the cooking, trying to block out her sister's words. But each one struck like a physical blow. She'd known this day might come, had dreaded it even as she'd begun to hope it never would. The day stretched long and painful. Eliza produced a hamper of fine foods from her luggage: citrus fruits, chocolate, expensive preserves. "I thought you might appreciate some civilized provisions," she said, arranging them on Anna's clean shelves. When supper time arrived, Anna served the venison stew she'd prepared, though it seemed plain beside Eliza's offerings. Her sister picked at the food, instead regaling them with tales of her social triumphs back east. "And of course," Eliza mentioned casually, stirring her stew, "I've already received several interesting offers here in town. The railroad men seem quite eager to discuss business opportunities." She glanced at Luca. "Though naturally, I wouldn't dream of entertaining such offers if there were other arrangements to be made." The threat lay thinly veiled beneath her words. Anna's hands trembled as she gathered the dishes, nearly dropping a bowl. Luca's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. "Anna, dear," Eliza called, "do be careful with the dishes, though I suppose they're common enough to replace." Night fell early, as it always did in winter. Anna made up a bed for Eliza near the fire, using her best quilt. Her sister complained about the roughness of the fabric, but finally settled in. Anna lay in her own bed, staring into the darkness. The happiness of Christmas Eve felt like a distant dream. Had she been foolish to think she could build a real life here? Perhaps God had only meant this as a temporary refuge, a trial to be endured. She pressed her face into her pillow, trying to muffle her quiet tears. Through the cabin walls, she could hear movement in the barn, Luca's heavy footsteps pacing back and forth, the sound matched the restless beating of her heart. In the main room, Eliza's breathing eventually settled into the rhythm of sleep. But Anna remained awake, watching moonlight create patterns on the ceiling. Everything she'd built here, everything she'd come to love, suddenly felt as fragile as frost on a window pane. The night stretched endless before her. She thought of Luca's kiss, of prayers shared, over the family Bible, of quiet moments that had slowly filled this cabin with hope. Now those memories ached like bruises. In the barn, Luca's pacing continued. She imagined him out there in the cold, wrestling with the trouble that had arrived on his doorstep. Was he comparing her to Eliza, regretting the tender moments they'd shared? The wind picked up, rattling the cabin's windows. Anna pulled her blanket tighter, feeling more alone than she had even on that first frightening night. She whispered a prayer into the darkness, though the words caught in her throat. "Dear Lord, give me strength. Show me the path I'm meant to follow." But no clear answer came. There was only the wind, Eliza's soft breathing, and the sound of Luca's footsteps marking time in the barn. Anna lay awake until the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, her heart heavy with uncertainty about what the morning would bring. The January days crept by with painful slowness. Eliza had transformed the cabin's main room into her personal domain, draping her fine shawls over chairs and arranging her possessions on every available surface. The scent of her expensive perfume hung in the air, covering the honest smells of wood smoke and fresh bread that Anna had come to love. Anna tried to maintain her usual routines, rising early to tend the fire and prepare breakfast. But Eliza's presence made every task feel harder, weighted with criticism and comparison. "Really, Anna," Eliza said one morning, watching her sister knead bread dough. "Your hands are becoming so rough. A proper lady should take better care of herself." Anna continued working the dough, saying nothing. Her hands were rough, from washing, cooking, and caring for the home she'd come to cherish. Each callus felt like a badge of honor, though Eliza saw only shame in them. Luca spent more time than usual in the barn, or checking his trap lines, avoiding the tension that filled the cabin. When he did come inside, his eyes often sought Anna's, but they rarely had a moment alone. Eliza always seemed to be there, inserting herself between them with some story or request. "Mr. Kane," she would say, her voice honey-sweet, "surely you remember how Father spoke of my musical talents? I could sing for you this evening, something more refined than hymns." The subtle barb made Anna wince as she stirred the soup pot. She'd thought Luca had come to appreciate her simple songs. Now she wondered if he was comparing her plain voice to Eliza's trained one. One particularly cold afternoon, Anna was hanging washing in the barn when she heard the sound of approaching hooves. A well-dressed man rode up on a sleek bay horse, his coat marking him as someone of importance. He dismounted with practiced ease and adjusted his hat. A railroad man, by his bearing. Anna stayed hidden in the barn's shadows, watching as Eliza hurried out to meet him. They spoke in low voices, then moved around the corner of the cabin where they thought they couldn't be seen. But their words carried through the crisp air to where Anna stood frozen. "Miss Whitcomb," the man said, "I represent the Western Pacific Railroad Company. We understand you're the original bride contracted to Mr. Kane." "That's correct," Eliza replied, though circumstances prevented my immediate arrival. "Indeed." The man's voice turned thoughtful. "Our company has a particular interest in this land. The water rights alone are quite valuable. If someone were to testify that the current arrangement is not legally binding, it would significantly weaken Mr. Kane's claim." Anna's heart pounded. She pressed closer to the barn wall, straining to hear. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Eliza asked. "The railroad would be very grateful to anyone who helped clarify the true nature of this situation. Grateful enough to ensure a comfortable future for such a person. Say $5,000? The amount hung in the air. Anna felt sick. It was more money than she'd ever seen. More than enough to set someone up in luxury back east. "That's a very generous offer." Eliza's voice wavered slightly. "We're prepared to be even more generous if necessary. The company wants this land, Miss Whitcomb, and you're in a unique position to help us acquire it." Anna couldn't bear to hear more. She slipped out the barn's back door, leaving the washing forgotten on the line. Her legs felt weak as she made her way to the cabin's root cellar, needing somewhere to hide, to think, to pray. The rest of the day passed in a blur of domestic tasks, but Anna's mind kept returning to what she'd overheard. She watched Eliza at supper, noting her sister's distracted expression, the way she pushed food around her plate instead of eating. After Luca went out for his evening check of the stock, Anna finally gathered her courage. She found Eliza arranging her hair by the firelight. "Why did you really come here?" Anna asked softly. Eliza's hand stilled on her hairbrush. "I told you, to claim what's rightfully mine." "After all these months? After choosing another man over Luca?" Anna's voice remained gentle, though her heart ached. "Please, Eliza, tell me the truth." Eliza spun around, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "The truth? The truth is you were never meant to be here. You were just the spare, the plain one Father could send in my place when I made a better match. No one expected you to actually build a life here." "I have built a life here," Anna said quietly. "A good one." "Oh yes, playing at being a proper wife, singing your little hymns, pretending you belong in a world you don't understand." Eliza's words cut like winter wind. "Did you think Luca actually chose you? That he could prefer you over me?" The cabin door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. Luca stood in the doorway, his expression dark as he sensed the tension between the sisters. Anna couldn't bear to meet his eyes, couldn't stand to see if Eliza's words had struck home. Without a word, she grabbed her shawl and slipped past him into the night. The snow crunched under her feet as she ran, not caring where she was going. Tears spilled down her cheeks, freezing before they could fall. Finally, she stopped at the edge of the clearing, sinking to her knees in the snow. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant as her sister's heart. Anna clasped her hands together, her prayers rising like smoke in the frozen air. "Lord," she whispered, "show me what to do. Give me strength to face whatever comes." The wind whipped around her, carrying the sound of coyotes calling in the distance. She stayed there, letting the cold seep into her bones, knowing she needed guidance now more than ever before. Behind her, warm light spilled from the cabin windows. She could see Eliza's silhouette moving inside, elegant and assured. And somewhere in the shadows, Luca waited, perhaps already regretting the Christmas Eve kiss that had given Anna such hope. Anna pressed her hands to her heart, trying to hold together the pieces that felt like they were breaking apart. The railroad man's offer hung in her mind. $5,000 that could destroy everything she'd come to love. Would Eliza choose money over family? Would she sacrifice Anna's happiness for her own gain? The questions swirled like snowflakes around her, offering no answers. Anna remained kneeling in the snow, her tears slowly freezing on her cheeks, praying for the wisdom to navigate the treacherous path ahead. The night grew deeper around her, but still she prayed, pouring out her fear and hurt to the only one who had never failed her. Behind her, the cabin waited, filled with uncertainty and the bitter taste of betrayal. The lantern's flame guttered in the drafty cabin as Anna folded her simple cotton dresses. Her hands trembled as she tucked them into the same worn satchel she'd arrived with just months ago. Outside, the wind moaned through the pines, a lonesome sound that matched the ache in her chest. She traced her fingers over the quilt on her narrow bed, the one she'd mended so carefully during those first cold nights. Every stitch held a memory. Hymns sung by lamplight, quiet suppers shared with Luca, the gradual warming of his stern face when she'd tend to his torn clothes or prepare his favorite cornbread. But now Eliza's words echoed in her mind. "You were never meant to be here." The truth of it cut deep. She'd been a replacement, nothing more. A stand-in for her beautiful sister, sent by a father who saw her as expendable. And though she'd poured her heart into making this rough cabin a home, though she'd fallen in love with both the land and the scarred man who worked it, she could not pretend anymore. Anna reached for a scrap of paper and her pencil stub. The words came slowly, each one weighted with unshed tears. "Dear Mr. Kane, I thank you for your kindness these past months. You gave me shelter when you might have sent me away, that first day. But I cannot stay, knowing I was never the one you wanted. Your land claim needs a true wife's testimony. Eliza can provide that now. I pray God's blessing on your life together. With gratitude, Anna May." She folded the note carefully, pressing it flat against the table. The cabin felt suddenly strange, as if it already belonged to someone else. Eliza's fine dresses hung by the fire, her perfume scenting the air. Soon enough, her sister's refined touch would transform these rough-hewn walls into something genteel and proper. Taking up her satchel, Anna slipped out to the barn. The familiar smells of hay and leather wrapped around her as she made her way to the back corner, where she often went to pray. She needed a moment to gather her courage before walking to town through the snow. The horses nickered softly in their stalls. Anna set down her bag and reached out to stroke the nose of Luca's bay mare. "I'll miss you too, old girl," she whispered. The horse's breath was warm against her palm. The barn door creaked open, letting in a gust of cold air. Anna's heart stuttered as Luca's tall frame filled the doorway. He held a lantern high, its light catching the worry in his eyes as he scanned the barn's shadows. "You weren't at supper," he said gruffly. Then his gaze fell on her satchel. Something flickered across his face. Confusion. Maybe fear. "What's this?" Anna couldn't meet his eyes. I thought it best if I left quietly." "Left?" The word came out rough, like it had scraped his throat raw. "Where would you go?" "To town, first. Then perhaps back east if I can find work as a seamstress or—" Her voice wavered. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I won't stand between you and the life you chose before." Luca took a step forward, then stopped as if struck. "The life I chose?" "With Eliza." Anna's hands twisted in her skirts. "She's here now, just as you originally wanted. And with her testimony about the land claim." "Anna!" Her name sounded like it had been torn from him. She forced herself to continue, though each word felt like glass in her throat. "I know I was never meant to be here. I was just a poor substitute, sent because Father insisted. But now you can have what you truly wanted all along." Luca stood frozen, his knuckles white on the lantern handle. The flame cast strange shadows across his scarred face, making his expression unreadable. Anna waited for him to agree, to let her go with the same gruff dismissal he'd given her that first day. Instead, he remained silent, his massive frame rigid with some emotion she dared not name. The quiet stretched between them like a chasm, broken only by the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls and the winter wind rattling the barn's timbers. "I should get my Bible," Anna whispered at last. It was the only thing she hadn't packed, too precious to risk dropping in the snow. She moved to slip past him, keeping her eyes lowered so he wouldn't see her tears. Luca didn't stop her. He stood like a statue as she edged around him, her skirts brushing his coat. Only when she reached the door did she hear him move. A sharp, violent motion as his hands gripped the rough-hewn rafters above his head. She paused there, one hand on the doorframe. "I'm grateful for the shelter you provided, Mr. Kane. Truly, I am." Still he said nothing. Anna stepped out into the snowy night, leaving him alone in the lantern-lit barn. Through the windows, she could see Eliza moving about the cabin, arranging things to her liking. The sight pushed Anna forward through the drifts toward the door. Inside, she would gather her Bible and the note she'd written. Then she would walk away from everything her heart had grown to love. The mountain views, the smell of pine, the quiet strength of a man who had begun to heal under her gentle care. Behind her in the barn, Luca stood gripping the rafters, his head bowed between his outstretched arms. The lantern cast his shadow long against the wall, a solitary figure caught between silence and truth, between the woman he'd thought he wanted and the one who had actually brought light back into his dark world. The night wrapped around them both, full of unspoken words and choices yet to be made. Snow began to fall again, soft and steady, slowly covering Anna's tracks between barn and cabin, as if trying to erase all evidence that she had ever been there at all. Dawn crept over the mountain peaks, painting the snow-covered town in pale gold. The crunch of boots on packed snow echoed through the empty street as Marshal Carter made his way to the courthouse, a rolled notice tucked under his arm. His breath clouded in the frigid morning air as he hammered the paper to the weathered board. Inside Luca's cabin, Anna stirred at her usual early hour. She moved like a shadow through the dim interior, careful not to wake Eliza, who slept late in the bed that had once been Anna's. The fire had burned low overnight, and Anna added kindling with practiced hands, coaxing warmth back into the space. Her fingers trembled slightly as she measured coffee into the pot. 3 portions now, where once there had been 2. The routine that had brought her comfort for months now felt like a burden, each domestic task a reminder of what she would soon lose. Luca's heavy tread on the porch made her spine stiffen. He entered without a word, stamping snow from his boots. Their eyes met briefly before his gaze slid away. He had hardly spoken since finding her in the barn with her packed satchel, as if words themselves had become dangerous things. "Coffee's nearly ready," Anna said softly, more to break the silence than anything else. He grunted in response, taking his usual seat at the table. The morning light caught the new lines of worry etched around his mouth, the tension in his broad shoulders. Anna set his cup before him, careful not to let their fingers brush. The clatter of hooves outside drew their attention. Through the frosted window, they watched several townsfolk gathering around the courthouse notice board. Within hours, the news would spread through every shop and parlor in town. "I'm going to check the traps," Luca announced abruptly, pushing back from the table. The door banged shut behind him, rattling in its frame. Eliza emerged from the bedroom shortly after, her golden hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. My, she said, peering through the window. "Something's certainly got the town buzzing this morning." Anna kept her eyes on her work, kneading dough for the day's bread. Flour dusted her apron, her plain calico dress, her work-roughened hands. Everything about her felt colorless next to Eliza's fine green wool dress and delicate lace collar. "I think I'll walk into town," Eliza announced, pinning on her hat. "See what all the excitement's about." The door hadn't fully closed behind her sister before Anna heard the whispers start up outside. She forced herself to continue working, though each thump of her fists against the dough felt like a blow to her own heart. By midday, the gossip had spread like wildfire. Anna could see it in the sidelong glances cast her way as she hung washing on the line, hear it in the sudden hush that fell when she stepped into the general store for supplies. "Poor plain thing," one woman murmured to another, not quite low enough. Did she really think a man like Luca Kane would keep her once the real bride arrived? "I heard tell he never even shared her bed," another whispered back. "Just kept her on as a housekeeper till his proper wife could come claim him." Anna's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high as she gathered her purchases. The storekeeper's wife gave her a look of pity as she counted out her change. Back at the cabin, Eliza was holding court on the porch, surrounded by several of the town's most prominent ladies. Her laugh rang out, bright and confident. "Of course the land claim hearing will settle everything," Eliza was saying as Anna approached. "After all, I am the bride who was promised. Poor Anna was just keeping things tidy until I could arrive." Anna slipped past them without a word, her arms full of supplies. Inside, she began preparing supper with mechanical precision, chopping vegetables for stew while tears slid silently down her cheeks. The afternoon light was fading when Luca returned, his coat crusted with snow from the mountain. He paused in the doorway, watching Anna at her work. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or regret, but still he said nothing. Anna wiped her hands on her apron, gathering her courage. "Mr. Kane," she said quietly, "about the land claim hearing—" He turned away, but she pressed on. "I want you to know that I'll testify truthfully, no matter what you decide. About when I arrived, about our arrangement." Her voice shook slightly on the last word. "I won't lie, even to help your claim. But I won't harm it either. That much, I can promise." Luca stood rigid, his broad back to her. The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words they couldn't seem to say. Finally, he turned his head slightly, his profile harsh in the fading light. His eyes met hers for one long, searching moment before he looked away again. Without a word, he strode back outside, leaving Anna alone in the gathering darkness. She pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob as she sank onto a kitchen chair. That night, lying on her borrowed cot in the main room, Anna could hear Eliza's soft breathing from the bedroom that had once been hers. The cabin creaked and settled in the cold, familiar sounds that had become a comfort during her months here. Now they only emphasized her isolation. She pulled her Bible from beneath her pillow, its worn leather smooth against her fingers. The pages fell open to the Psalms, as they so often did these days. Tears blurred her vision as she traced the familiar words. "The Lord is my shepherd," she whispered into the darkness. "I shall not want." But oh, how she did want. Wanted to belong here, in this home she'd come to love. Wanted Luca to look at her again with the warmth he'd shown on Christmas Eve. Wanted to be more than just a temporary convenience, a poor substitute for her radiant sister. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." Her voice caught on a sob. "He leadeth me beside the still waters." Outside, an owl called mournfully from the pine trees. Anna pressed her face into her pillow, shoulders shaking as she tried to muffle her crying. Still, she forced herself to continue the psalm, clinging to its promises like a lifeline. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." The words blurred together as exhaustion finally overtook her. She fell asleep with the Bible clutched to her chest, tear tracks drying on her cheeks, while the mountain wind keened around the cabin's corners like a living thing sharing her grief. In his room, Luca lay awake, listening to the quiet sounds of Anna's prayers turning to tears, his hands clenched in the darkness, but still he said nothing. The silence between them grew deeper with each passing hour, like the snow drifting against the cabin walls, burying them all in its cold embrace. Dawn broke cold and clear over the mountain town. Anna stood before the small mirror in the cabin, pinning her hair with trembling fingers. She had chosen her plainest calico dress, faded blue with tiny white flowers, wanting to appear honest and humble before the marshal. The fabric was worn at the elbows, but clean and pressed. She touched the simple cross at her throat, the only ornament she owned. Behind her, Eliza rustled in silk, her green dress catching the morning light like a peacock's feathers. "Really, Anna," Eliza sighed, adjusting her elaborate hat. "You might have at least borrowed something more suitable for court." Anna said nothing, smoothing her skirts with work-roughened hands. The wagon ride into town passed in tense silence, Luca's jaw clenched as he guided the horses through fresh snow. The town hall's windows glowed with lamplight, shadows moving within as people gathered. Inside, the room was already crowded. Ranchers in their Sunday best stood shoulder to shoulder with merchants in fine coats. Railroad men clustered near the front, their suits marking them as outsiders. The marshal sat behind a heavy oak desk, his weathered face impassive as he sorted through papers. Anna felt the weight of stares as she entered. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through prairie grass. She kept her spine straight, though her heart fluttered like a trapped bird. Luca moved to stand apart, his tall frame rigid with tension. "This hearing will come to order," Marshal Carter announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We're here to determine the validity of Luca Kane's land claim, specifically regarding his marital status at time of filing." The railroad agent rose first, all smooth manner and polished boots. "We call Miss Eliza Whitcomb to testify." Eliza glided forward, every inch the proper lady. She smiled at the assembly, her golden curls catching the lamplight. "I am the bride who was promised to Mr. Kane," she declared. "My father arranged everything. Anna was sent only as a temporary replacement while I fulfilled a prior commitment." The agent nodded encouragingly. "And was there ever a proper marriage ceremony between Mr. Kane and your sister?" "No," Eliza said firmly. "How could there be? She was never meant to stay." Murmurs rose again. Anna felt the blood drain from her face, but she kept her eyes forward, lips moving in silent prayer. "Lord, give me strength. Show me your path." The railroad agent produced a document with a flourish. "We have here the original marriage arrangement, clearly stating Eliza Whitcomb as the intended bride. Furthermore, we have witnesses who will testify that Mr. Kane and Anna Mae Whitcomb have lived as nothing more than housekeeper and employer." The whispers grew louder. Anna's hands twisted in her lap, but she refused to bow her head. Though tears pricked at her eyes, she would face whatever came with dignity. "Does anyone speak in opposition?" the marshal asked, his stern gaze sweeping the room. The silence stretched like a bowstring pulled taut. Then, a chair scraped back. Heavy boots struck the wooden floor. Luca Kane rose to his full height, his scarred face fierce in the lamplight. He strode forward, each step deliberate. When he reached Anna's chair, he extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her trembling fingers in his calloused palm. He drew her to stand beside him, facing the crowd. "I have something to say." His deep voice filled every corner of the hall. The room fell silent as a church during prayer. "This woman," he continued, his grip tightening on Anna's hand, "is my wife, not by paper or by plan, but by God's own choosing." He turned to face her, his eyes softening as they met hers. "I was bitter when she came instead of her sister. Angry at being cheated, I thought. But the Lord knew better than I did what I needed." Anna's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead like a runaway horse. Luca's voice grew stronger, ringing with conviction. "God himself sent her instead of her sister, and I thank him for it. She brought light back into my dark places, showed me what real faith looks like, reminded me what it means to have a home." He faced the marshal squarely. "I don't care what that paper says. Anna Mae Whitcomb is my true wife, chosen by heaven itself, and I'll fight any man or railroad who tries to say different." The hall fell absolutely silent. Even the railroad agent seemed struck speechless, his mouth working without sound. Eliza sank slowly into her chair, color high in her cheeks. The silence in the town hall shattered as Eliza suddenly burst into tears, her composure crumbling like autumn leaves. She stumbled to her feet, fumbling in her reticule with shaking hands. Paper bills spilled onto the marshal's desk. "I cannot," she choked out. "I cannot bear this shame any longer." Her voice trembled as she faced the crowded room. "The railroad agent offered me $500 to testify against my sister, to help steal Luca's land." Her shoulders shook with sobs. "I took the money, thinking only of fine dresses and an easy life." The railroad agent's face darkened. He started forward, but Marshal Carter's stern voice cut through the rising murmurs. "Stand back, sir. Let her speak." Eliza's tears fell freely now, spotting her silk dress. "I was so proud, so certain I deserved better than this mountain town. But watching my sister these past days, her quiet strength, her genuine faith, I see now how wrong I was." Marshal Carter gathered the scattered bills, his weathered face grave. Attempted bribery of a witness is a serious offense. He fixed the railroad agent with a steely gaze. "This hearing is concluded. The land claim stands firm in favor of Mr. and Mrs. Kane." The agent spluttered protests, but the marshal's gavel crashed down. "Furthermore, I'll be sending a full report to the territorial governor regarding these corrupt practices." From his place near the pulpit, the preacher rose, his Bible open in weathered hands. "As the good book says, the truth shall set you free. We've witnessed that truth today, plain as sunrise on the mountains." Eliza crumpled into her chair, shoulders heaving. Anna released Luca's hand and moved toward her sister, her calico skirts rustling in the hushed room. She knelt beside Eliza, touching her arm gently. "Sister," Anna whispered, her own voice unsteady. "I forgive you." Eliza raised her tear-stained face. "How can you, after all I've done?" "Because that's what family does," Anna replied softly. "That's what the Lord teaches us." Eliza caught Anna's work-roughened hands in her soft ones. "I've been so foolish, so blind. You found real treasure here while I chased shadows." She straightened, wiping her eyes. "I'll make it right. I'll find honest work, perhaps teaching at the school. The children need education, and I did train for it." Luca watched the sisters, his scarred face softening as he observed Anna's mercy. Pride swelled in his chest, not the bitter pride of before, but something warmer, like sunshine after storm. This quiet woman had brought more strength to his home than any he'd known. The crowd began to disperse, filing out into the crisp morning air. Where before there had been whispers and sideways glances, now people stopped to greet Luca and Anna warmly. Mrs. Peterson, the baker's wife, pressed Anna's hand. "You're a credit to our town, Mrs. Kane. Both of you." "Much obliged," Luca replied, his gruff voice gentler than usual. He placed a protective hand on Anna's shoulder, no longer afraid to show his feelings before others. Old Jim Tucker, who'd known Luca since his darkest days after the war, clapped him on the back. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, don't he? Sent you the right sister after all." The marshal approached, official papers in hand. "Your deed, Mr. Kane. Ironclad now, with 2 witnesses to the attempted bribe. That railroad won't trouble you again." The town buzzed with excitement as people gathered in small groups, discussing the morning's events. The railroad agent and his men slunk away, their scheme in shambles. Near the hitching post, Eliza stood uncertainly until Anna touched her arm. "Come home with us," Anna said. "Stay until you find your feet. There's room enough." Luca nodded his agreement, and Eliza's eyes filled with fresh tears. Grateful ones this time. As they climbed into the wagon, the preacher raised his hand in blessing. "Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another," he quoted, his voice carrying across the town square. "We've seen Scripture made living truth this day." The morning sun broke through the clouds as Luca guided the team homeward, its golden light touching everything with promise. Anna sat between her husband and sister, her heart full of quiet joy. The truth had indeed set them all free, though not in ways any had expected. Winter mellowed into early spring, bringing fresh beginnings to the mountain town. The church schoolhouse, once empty most days, now rang with children's voices as Eliza found her true calling. She stood at the wooden blackboard each morning, chalk dust on her fingers, teaching not just letters and numbers, but also kindness and truth. The transformation in her was clear to all who watched. Gone was the proud beauty seeking fortune, replaced by a woman who had found genuine purpose. At the Kane homestead, the cabin grew warmer with each passing day, and not just from the strengthening sun. Anna's gentle hymns filled the kitchen while she kneaded bread or stirred stew, and Luca's deep voice would sometimes join hers, hesitant, at first, but growing stronger. Their shared work flowed in comfortable rhythms, him bringing in freshly split wood, her hanging laundry in the sweet mountain air, their hands meeting over daily tasks that had become acts of devotion. Neighbors who had once turned away now stopped by regularly, bearing gifts and friendship. Mrs. Peterson brought a golden loaf of her famous sourdough bread, while the quilting circle presented Anna with a carefully stitched blanket in blues and browns, like the mountain sky. "For your first winter as true man and wife," they said, their eyes warm with acceptance. One clear evening, after the supper dishes were dried and put away, Luca took Anna's hand. "Come outside with me," he said softly. She followed him into the twilight, where the first stars were beginning to pierce the darkening sky. They stood together, their breaths making small clouds in the cool air. The snow had retreated to just the highest peaks, leaving the valley fresh with the scent of awakening earth. Luca's hand tightened on hers. "I reckon I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "When I sent for a bride, I was thinking only of duty, someone to cook and clean, to help hold the land." He paused, looking up at the emerging constellations. "But God had other plans. He sent me more than a housekeeper. He sent me a partner, a true wife." Anna pressed her hand against his work-worn palm, feeling the strength there and the gentleness that had grown like spring flowers through rocky soil. "Love finds its own way," she whispered, "even in the hardest ground, if we tend it with faith." They turned back toward their cabin, where lamplight spilled golden through the windows. Inside, the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the fresh quilts added splashes of color to the once bare room. But the real warmth came from the love that had bloomed there, as steady and true as the mountains themselves. Spring crept into the Colorado mountains like a gentle awakening. The last patches of snow retreated up the slopes, leaving behind tender green shoots and tiny wildflowers that dotted the meadows. Streams that had slept beneath ice now danced and tumbled down the hillsides, their song a constant reminder of nature's renewal. Anna knelt in the freshly turned earth beside the cabin, her hands deep in the dark soil as she planted the seeds she'd carefully saved through winter. The morning sun warmed her back while she worked, tucking each precious seed into its new home with a whispered prayer. Her small garden plot might seem modest to some, but to her it represented hope taking root. Carrots, beans, and hardy greens that would feed them through the coming seasons. The steady rhythm of Luca's axe rang out nearby as he split wood for the cooking fire. Though the days grew warmer, mountain nights still held their chill. Anna paused in her planting to watch him work, admiring how the sun caught his dark hair and the way his movement showed both strength and grace. He had changed since that first cold meeting on the porch. His hard edges softened, his eyes warmed by love and purpose. From the direction of town, children's voices lifted on the spring breeze. The sound of their laughter mixed with Eliza's clear instructions drifting from the churchyard where she now taught. Anna smiled, remembering how God's plan had transformed not just her own life, but her sister's as well. Eliza had found her true calling among the town's children, teaching them letters and numbers with the same passion she once spent on seeking fortune. Throughout the afternoon, Anna tended her garden and the cabin, singing hymns as she worked. The walls that had once felt like a prison now embraced her like a sanctuary. Every corner held memories of growing love. The table where they shared meals, the hearth where they read scripture together, the windowsill where she still placed a candle each night to guide weary travelers. As evening approached, she prepared their supper with practiced ease. The cabin filled with the aroma of fresh bread and stew, made special by the first spring herbs she'd gathered that morning. Luca came in from his work, washing up at the basin she'd filled. Their movements around each other had become a comfortable dance, each anticipating the other's needs without words. After the dishes were cleared and dried, Anna took Luca's hand. "Come sit with me," she said softly, leading him to the porch. They settled onto the rough-hewn bench he'd built for them, their fingers intertwined as they watched the sun begin its descent behind the mountains. The fading light painted everything in shades of gold. The distant peaks, the new leaves on the aspens, even the weathered boards beneath their feet. A gentle breeze carried the scent of spring flowers and fresh earth, while birds called their evening songs from the nearby trees. Luca's thumb traced circles on Anna's palm as he gazed at the glorious sunset. "I never thought I'd have this," he said, his voice low and full of wonder. "After the war, after losing my family, I turned hard and cold, reckoned I'd live out my days alone in these mountains, bitter and ruthless as the winter storms." Anna squeezed his hand gently, encouraging him to continue. "But now I see," he went on, "God was preparing me all along. Every trial, every lonely night, every bitter moment, it was all leading me here, to this porch, this home." He turned to look at her, his eyes bright with emotion. "To you." Anna rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "He makes all things new," she whispered, offering up a prayer of thanksgiving. "Even the hardest hearts can bloom when tended with love." They sat in peaceful silence as the last rays of sun gilded the mountain tops. One by one, stars began to appear in the deepening blue of the sky, like diamonds scattered across velvet. Behind them, lamplight spilled through the cabin, windows, casting a warm glow that seemed to reach out and embrace them. That gentle light represented everything they'd built together: faith that had weathered storms, family forged through trial, and love that had grown strong in unlikely soil. Their home stood as a beacon in the wilderness, not just for themselves, but for all who needed reminder that God's grace could transform the bleakest winter into glorious spring. The mountains stood eternal around them, witnesses to their journey from strangers to beloved partners. Tomorrow would bring new tasks, new challenges, new opportunities to serve God and neighbor. But for now, they simply sat together in the gathering dusk, their hearts full of gratitude for the blessing of each other and the promise of all the seasons yet to come. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.